What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a moment to recap week 3 of the NFL season and start looking ahead to week 4 with some fantasy advice and gambling picks for Thursday Night Football in the weekend. But before we get started, just a reminder, you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys listening, and we would love to hear from you. Crazy couple of weeks of football to start the season. Reach out to us and let us know how you're feeling. You will not get spam emails from that account. It'll just be me responding to your emails. So if you just want to chit chat with me and Matt, we want to give us some football picks, gambling picks for the weekend, let us know, man. Hit us up. We really love hearing from you guys. I've had some really good conversations with some of the listeners of the show through that channel. And again, appreciate you guys listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcasts. But for now, let's grab Matt. Let's talk week 3 and a little week 4. We're like week 4 used to be the quarter pole when they only played 16 games. So it's like kind of the quarter pole next week. And I'm worried football is going by too fast. Like we've already played 3 weeks. It's crazy. And there's so much to talk about. So let's go. All right, Matt is here, fresh off of week 3 of the NFL season. Matt, how are we feeling after 3 weeks of football?
I'm feeling a lot better after a win.
Yeah, I think
I don't feel super good about this week for reasons, but we can get into that later.
I was gonna ask you like what your temperature is on the Detroit Lions right now after like they're 2-1. The 2 wins were kind of a struggle.
Yeah, I mean,
the loss is like really wonky.
So start with the pros. The defense is legit. It looks awesome. The con obviously is that the offense hasn't looked as good as everyone expected it to be. I fully expect Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell and the coaching staff with, the rest of the players on the offense to like eventually get that locked in as the season goes on. They aren't that far off. Like it feels like week 2 they didn't necessarily have the best plan, and they've acknowledged that. But like other than that, it's just been like a couple of things here and there on plays that were kind of crucial and like just not being honed in yet. For me, my concern right now is the injury bug. They got hit pretty hard with that this week. So they have their bye next week, and that is much needed at this point. So we will see who's available this week, but they are almost certainly going to be going up against a really fucking good Seattle team, shorthanded. So,
which also anytime Seattle comes to town,
we get fucked.
It's just wild every single game. Like,
yeah,
the last couple times,
we never come out on top in that scenario.
No, but it's always like 37-34, like something crazy like that.
Yeah.
So I think the offense thing is a league-wide situation at this point.
It is.
It's not like Lions specific. So the NFL as a whole is averaging 21.4 points per game. Like if you combine all the teams, that's the lowest since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a portion of it is that it's early in the season. But another portion is that we're in a defensive cycle right now, where if you study the history of football, there's a really good book called Blood, Sweat, and Chalk, which is a little old now, but the point still stands, where they talked about how offense was played when football was invented and how defense is reactionary by nature. So the defenses had to find a way to stop the offenses. And then when they finally started stopping them, the offenses are like, okay, we got to innovate so that we can score points on the defense. And the
Mhm.
defense is like, oh, we got to change. And it's a cycle where the offense does something new and the defense catches up. And you think about things like read option and RPOs and the spread offense and like all these things that have been innovations over the last 15 years. The defense keeps catching up. And now it seems like we're at a point where the defense has caught up. And so we're going to have a couple years where it looks more like this. The scoring might take off too. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be 20 points per game the rest of the season because teams will get sharper and start playing better.
Yeah.
But the defenses have caught up. And like what you're seeing is a lot of cover two that's slowing down offenses. Tight ends have been taken away so far this season at a rate at which we have not seen these elite tight ends taken away. Like, if you have a fantasy team, that tight
Yeah.
ends have not played well so far
I
this
mean,
season.
it, and unless you had like Brock Bowers or like Goddard, you really haven't gotten much.
Yeah, I got 0 out of Mark Andrews this week. One target, and he didn't catch it. These are like the things that are happening, right? And all of these outlets and like media personalities and stuff are coming out and they're being like, oh, scoring is down. All the quarterbacks suck and it's bad for the game, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, if you watch it and you understand the strategy, it's like interesting. And one of the reasons
Yeah.
this, like the Saints were so successful through 2 weeks was, hey, we're going to attack cover two. And then we saw what happened this week, which we could talk about that in a little bit. But that's going to be the innovate. Like, so now it's going to be how do offenses innovate to attack these cover two schemes? And we'll see what they come up with. I think the obvious answer is that you get bigger and start running the ball again and force them to bring more people into the box again. But a lot of teams don't want to do that. A lot of teams aren't set up to do that long term. So be interesting to see how it plays out. But that's kind of for people that are worried about the NFL and being like, the product sucks. Like, that's what's going on. Defenses have caught up to what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stopping you with cover two. So, but we talked about week one being the we don't know anything week. Week two being the false sense of security week where we're like, okay, we know stuff now. It turns out you don't know anything. Looking back at the week of football we just played, I'm dubbing this the wake up call week. I think there's a lot of teams, players, fans who got a wake up call this week after 2 weeks of kind of living in la la land. Like, my team was a really good example. The Patriots on Thursday Night Football, where we beat Cincinnati week one and then played a really tight game that we should have won against Seattle week two at home. And it's like, oh man, like Patriot fans kind of feeling ourselves a little bit like, oh, maybe this team's a little bit better than we thought. Maybe Mayo's a good coach. Absolutely schmeckeldorfed by the Jets on Thursday Night Football. Horrible. One of the worst performances I've ever seen. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the team that we all expected this year. So, like, a little bit of a wake up call. Those are the kind of things I'm talking about. And I wrote down a list of teams, players, fans, people who got wake up calls this week. I'm not going to go too far back for the first one because we're recording this on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I watched Monday Night Football last night, flipping between the two options. And I did not watch a lot of Buffalo versus Jacksonville last night because that game was over before it started.
Yeah, I watched more of it than I should have, and probably in large part because it's just like it's hard to stop watching Josh Allen.
Yeah, he was spectacular
He's so
last
fun to
night.
watch.
So good. Like, clearly the leader in the clubhouse for MVP
Yeah.
through 3 games right now. He's been in a season like we just talked about where defenses have kind of caught up and quarterbacks have not been that
Hmm.
great to start the season. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
But wake up call I thought last night for Jacksonville is that Trevor Lawrence isn't it.
Yeah.
So the Bills win 47-10 on Monday Night Football. Lawrence is 21 of 38, 178 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Matt, are we at the point where you would consider Trevor Lawrence a bust?
I think we have to define that. But I mean, with the expectation that he came into the league with, yes, he was being put up by a lot of people. Uh, go back into the archives and see that I wasn't among them, but like being put up in as a prospect, like on the level of like Andrew Luck, right? Like everyone couldn't wait to get their hands on Trevor Lawrence. He has not had a year in the league where he has been anything more than slightly above average. And that was really more so because he closed the year strong one year. Like he hasn't even had a full good year.
I was thinking about him last night because they got absolutely dominated by Buffalo. And then after the game, Peterson came out and he's like, we're going to consider personnel changes everywhere, including at quarterback. So they're going to look at starting Mac Jones, who came into the game last night and instantly fumbled and lost the fumble to the defense, which
Yeah.
was hilarious. But I was thinking about Lawrence because I can't think of another like elite top pick at quarterback who has avoided more criticism than Trevor Lawrence.
He got the bag purely based on where he was drafted, right? Because they weren't quite ready to say they were done with him. So they were like, yeah, we're gonna throw 55 million a year at you for what, 5 years?
Yeah,
Yeah.
even guys who didn't have the pedigree that he has have gotten like I think about like Tua Tagovailoa. Tua's gotten apps, and I'm like not trying to kick him while he's down, but he's gotten shredded by the media.
Yeah.
And guys like Daniel Jones have gotten destroyed by the media, and none of those guys had the pedigree that Trevor Lawrence has.
Yeah.
And
And
Trevor Lawrence has not been better than Daniel Jones.
no, actually, he now in his career has a lower passer rating than Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Let me tell you something alarming. So Trevor Lawrence has now started 53 career games. He's 20-33, passer rating of 84.5. Daniel Jones has started 62 career games. He's 23-38 and one. I was like, wait, that doesn't add up. And he has a career passer rating of 84.9, so slightly higher than Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence has 60 touchdowns, 40 picks. Jones has 66 touchdowns, 42 picks. I mean, basically the same guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like the records are similar. Jones has just started more games. I think in, what is it, 9 more games? Trevor Lawrence, 6 touchdowns, 2 picks. Like that's probably too good for him in the next 9 games. But they're basically like the same guy. And yet, because of where Daniel Jones plays, he gets absolutely eviscerated.
Yeah.
Even though they're like stats are the same, they've had the same amount of success. They've both won one playoff game that they shouldn't have won. One of them it's funny because one of them beat the Chargers and one of them beat the Vikings. And it's like, okay, well, that was obviously going to happen. But I think a lot of people look at Lawrence and they say, oh, well, the situation's been really bad for him. And they're not wrong.
Yeah.
But it just makes me think about like how many excuses are we going to make for this guy before we just admit that he's not good?
I want to preface this by saying Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, to an extent, although he certainly still has a lot more to prove, still Sam Darnold, like they have made the case that, yeah, maybe in a different coaching environment, Trevor Lawrence may have flourished, right? That's entirely possible. We still we need to see it, right? And we haven't. I don't even feel like we've gotten. I mean, it's not like he hasn't made any throws that were good or anything, but like I don't feel like we've gotten the flashes where we were like, whoa, that's the dude we thought we were getting.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the concerning thing for me.
Let me ask you this though, because you brought up a really interesting name. Do,
Yeah.
do you think Baker Mayfield is a bust? He was drafted number one overall as well.
I mean, how many teams in the NFL would take a quarterback that's playing on his level right now? Over half,
Yeah.
right?
I think he's interesting because like if you look at where he's at last season and this season, I don't think you would say he's a bust. But
Hmm.
if I told you the number one overall pick was gonna like flame out of the team that drafted him, have to go to like two different situations before he finally found his footing, like 6, 7 years into the league,
Yeah.
you're not drafting that guy.
Right.
You know what? And
Yeah.
like, so if Trevor Lawrence like has to leave Jacksonville and like sit on the bench in San Francisco for a year, like
Hmm.
Sam Darnold did, and then get a job somewhere else and start playing good, even if he is good
Yeah.
eventually, like, does that make him not a bust?
That is kind of where we need to define this more. Like, what is the purpose of that label? Is it specified on their initial landing place? Because that is very different than, where they end up in their career. So, I mean, I think that's really important.
Yeah,
It,
it's. I
it,
think it depends who you talk to too. Like, I
yeah,
think a Jets fan would probably tell you Geno Smith is a bust, and a Seattle fan would probably tell you that he's an awesome story. Like,
yeah,
same thing with Cleveland and Buccaneers fans. But it's just like it's an interesting concept to me because these guys were like, it's really easy to label someone like Jamarcus Russell or Ryan Leaf a bust. Someone
yeah,
who flamed out in like 3 seasons and never played again. You're like, okay, that was a bust. But like Baker Mayfield's an interesting case study because you're right. There's probably between 15 and 20 teams that
yep,
would love to have Baker Mayfield or love to have their quarterback playing on Baker Mayfield's level right now.
yep,
But also, if I was drafting somebody and you're like, yeah, he's going to suck for your team for 5 years, and then you're finally going to move on and he's going to be good somewhere else. I'm like, I'm not fucking taking that guy. That sounds horrible. That sounds worse than like, it's almost worse to have him go somewhere else and be successful because it just means you failed and that not like
yeah,
easy to blame the player. It's hard to accept responsibility and be like, okay, we just screwed up.
yeah. And so, like, I think that's where, like, the definition, but like the purpose of it too, is really important because, like, when you label someone a bust, you're putting that on them. But I think it's pretty evident that like Cleveland and the Jets fucked up. Both of those teams would love to have those quarterbacks playing for them at the level that they are right now.
I think that begs the question, though, of how long do we give these guys before we move on from them? Because I feel like the worst situation to be in the NFL is basically where the Jags are, where we keep making excuses for Trevor Lawrence. We keep changing things. We change the coaching staff. We change the wide receivers. We,
Hmm.
draft Travis Etienne. So that's like his
Yeah.
buddy from Clemson. We do all this stuff and we keep changing things around Lawrence because we're like, well, it has to work because we spent the first overall pick on him and gave him his second contract.
Yeah.
So they're just going to spend the next 4 or 5 years, however much longer he's on that team, trying to force this to work, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Giants. Is it's like their shorter time frame because Daniel Jones' extension isn't as bad, but it's like we've now spent 6 years trying to make Daniel Jones work.
Yeah.
It's fetch is not going to happen. Gretchen Wieners, it's not.
Yeah. And it, like, the brutal reality for Jags fans too is like probably stuck with him for at least another 3 years after this season based on that contract.
Yeah.
So like, eh,
Well,
it's what you've got.
this is the problem though, is like, it seems like the teams that have been most successful from pivoting from a bust quarterback have been the teams that make a quick decision.
Yeah.
So think of like Josh Rosen with the Cardinals.
Hmm.
They gave him not even a whole season, and they were like, nope, this guy's not it. We're drafting
Yeah.
Kyler Murray. I think the Patriots could end up being a good example. Like, we'll see. Drake May hasn't taken, or I guess he has taken a couple snaps, but
It did not go well.
didn't. Not his fault though.
No.
But I
It
think
was an
we really,
unfortunate bystander.
yeah, we really saw why they weren't playing Drake May on Thursday, because they got him in there. He got sacked like
Yeah.
twice in the first two snaps, but the teams that have moved on from guys and have correctly
Hmm.
admitted, like, hey, we made
Yeah.
a mistake, get rid of this guy, bring in the next guy, are the teams that have
Yeah.
been the most successful. But then I look at like the Bills, who stuck it out with Josh Allen
Hmm.
for a couple years. I think the Josh Allen thing's a little overstated because,
He he always had the flashes though.
yeah, but I looked at his stats, and like his rookie season was really bad. But his
Yeah.
sophomore year, he completed like 59% of his passes, 20 touchdowns, 9 picks.
Yeah.
And then like his third season, he was awesome. People talk
Yep.
about Josh Allen like he was a fucking dumpster fire for 7 years, and then all of a sudden they
No.
developed him. So it's a little overstated, but like still, the point
Hmm.
being that like you don't want to be the person that moves on from even like Baker Mayfield. Like, how stupid
Yeah.
does Cleveland look right now paying Deshaun Watson $1 billion while Mayfield tears it up for someone else?
Yeah.
You definitely don't want to be the guy that moves on from Josh Allen, because you're like, yeah, this kid, I don't know about this
Yeah.
kid. Let's bring in the next guy.
Right. And I think too, it's like you you committed the money to him this offseason, right? Like you made that bed. But we saw very clearly that like what we've got right now isn't working there. Like, but they also were just like, yeah, we're gonna run it back with Doug Peterson. If you were really like saying, hey, we are gonna try and make this work with Trevor Lawrence, then the solution needs to be something else needs to change. Yeah, like getting rid of Peterson and then trying to throw a bag at Dave Canales sounds like, like a good way to figure out whether or not he's actually got it.
One of the things I was thinking about this weekend, and this is going to sound like absolute lunacy,
Mhm.
absolute lunacy, because it is lunacy at this point. But you text me facetiously, like half joking, maybe not all the way. How long until we worry about Caleb Williams this weekend? And I jokingly responded, now. Like, we worry now. It's been 3 games. I'm worried now.
Yeah.
But and I'm not. I want to be very clear to all the aggregators. I am not saying that Caleb Williams is a bust. And like, it's been 3 games. Just
He needs
obviously
one
needs time.
more.
One more, and that's it. But I was just thinking about Caleb Williams though. Like, say Caleb Williams does end up being bad, or not even bad, like this mediocre, somewhere between like 17 and 23rd best quarterback in the league, like where
Mhm.
Trevor Lawrence is.
He ends up being like the J.R. Smith of quarterbacks.
Just gets hot every once in a while and balls. But couldn't you see Caleb Williams being like the Trevor Lawrence type of guy, where it's like, okay, well, his rookie year was really bad,
Yeah.
but Eberflus isn't a good coach. He didn't have a good O
Mhm.
line. And so they make changes next year, and then it still doesn't work. And it's like, oh, okay, well, but we got to do
Yeah.
this. And like they just keep changing things around him. It just keeps not working.
Yeah.
This is the key to running a successful franchise, is like being able to identify what isn't working and what needs to change.
Yeah.
And is it the coach? Is it the quarterback? like, because to be 100% honest, even with what we're saying about T-Law, if they
Mhm.
brought in a new coach who wasn't Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence
Yeah.
like took off next season, would you be 100% surprised?
Wouldn't be terribly surprised because we know he's got the physical talent, right? And yeah, the example I gave obviously was Dave Canales, and we both had very high opinions of him as a potential head coach, um, and someone working with quarterbacks. So like that would be a situation where I could certainly see him taking off, but like Trevor Lawrence is at coming into this season was already at a point where it's like I've got to see it to believe it's going to happen though.
Mm-hmm.
I doesn't mean I can't see the potential for it to happen, but like I'm not just gonna trust that it's going to happen until it actually happens.
I agree with you. And I could just see Trevor Lawrence being a guy who just keeps costing people jobs because they're like, well, I'll just take that Jacksonville job because then I get Trevor Lawrence. And like, he hasn't been good yet.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of that Arrested Development scene where
Yeah.
Tobias and Lindsay are talking and they're like, has an open marriage ever worked? And he's like, it hasn't worked for anybody yet, but maybe it could work for us.
Yeah.
And that's Trevor Lawrence is he's the like,
Yeah.
well, but maybe he would work for me
And it's
quarterback.
and it's tough because obviously we have the examples that we talked about, but then like you look at this season too, and both Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney look better than they ever did in a Bears uniform. And it's like we know essentially at this point where where the issue lagged. I'm not saying that like Justin Fields didn't have his own deficiencies, but it's like yeah, very clearly like Chicago was like at the center of the issue.
Yeah.
And like that's really the concerning thing for Caleb. I don't doubt his capacity, but you need certain things around you in order to be able to succeed and develop. And I don't know that he's not going to get that opportunity this year. And I honestly, if Ryan Poles survives this season, I don't think he'll get it next year.
That's the thing is like, obviously I have a lot of Caleb Williams stock. I very much believe in him. And
Yeah.
I think we've seen flashes already in the first three games of
Mm-hmm.
like the thing with like Josh Allen was like, yeah, he wasn't good as a rookie, but you saw the flashes and you're like, okay, that's
Yeah.
what. And with Caleb, we've seen that. Like the kid just
It in spades. Like even when he does bad things, it still looks cool.
the kid
Like
the kid also just threw for 363 yards this
yeah,
week against Indy. Like there was, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of problems, and he threw the ball 52 times, which like more on
yeah.
the Bears coaching staff of like you're going up against a team that's allowing over 200 yards rushing per game, and you throw 55
I
times.
mean, yeah, I will also say that when they tried to run the ball, it did not work at all.
Well, but this is the problem: is that like the interior offensive line is ass,
Yeah,
you know, and so even
and
if
it
the
has
Colts,
been for over 3 years, and that's you know Carlos has said it himself. Like it's mind-boggling that Ryan Poles was an offensive lineman in the NFL, and he apparently just doesn't see any value in those three positions, even though like you can actually make an argument that those three spots are more important than the tackles.
yeah, but also like just bringing this all the way back around to our conversation is all I'm saying is like if Caleb Williams did end up not living up to expectations, I could just see him being the next type of Trevor Lawrence where it's like, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, like year one were these problems, year two, like this happened and this happened. We got to give him an extension and we got to make it work around him. And let's bring in
yeah,
another coach and let's bring in other receivers. But I think the thing that really stands out with Caleb is like we said, you've seen the flashes already in spades. And Trevor Lawrence, it's like show me the flashes, man, because you're 0-3 now, and that game last night was fucking brutal.
Yeah.
It was brutal. And I think Buffalo's really good. You know,
Yeah.
we've kind of made the point for a couple weeks now that, and even in the preseason, they could be better without Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
Offense certainly looked it last night, but I think the defense is low key really good as well.
Yeah.
So I know it's a good team, but still, like you got to show us something because we're in year 4 or 5 with him. You're, God, what draft was he in? We're in year 4 with
Yeah.
him. He was in Mac Jones draft. Good Lord. And we're still not seeing it. So, it's easier when you just draft someone like Jaden Daniels, who comes out on Monday Night Football and absolutely balls in week 3. 21 of 23 is a rookie record, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, 39 rushing yards, and another touchdown. Like, so when you see that, it's like, hell yeah, we're 2-1. Our rookie quarterback is awesome. Like, let's go. But not everybody can beat Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
So
It is wild to me that they went ahead and threw him that bag heading into year 4, not through 4 years, heading into year 4, rather than just picking up the 5th-year option.
this is the thing is like, I've said this before on this podcast, is like, why, more related to basketball, I guess, because there's more like player option stuff there, but like, why are you making a decision before you have to? Like, this pissed me off. This happened with the Kings and Harry Giles years ago. It was like, I think it was Harry Giles. They declined his 5th-year option before his 4th year even started. And I'm like, you have a whole nother year where you can make this decision. Why did you feel the need to do it now?
It's like the equivalent of someone who hasn't worked out in like 10 years. Like saying like they're gonna commit to going back to the gym and buying like a year's worth of protein powder. Like
Yeah. Pretty much, but it's like, why do we have to make the decision on Trevor Lawrence right now? Why did you have to extend him before you
Yeah.
even picked up his 5th-year option? Like, pick up the option. Do the thing. For some reason, I can't remember who the player that like it really, God, who was it? There's someone that like really pissed me off.
I really did pick an appropriate background.
You did. There was someone where it like really did piss me off, where like and I think it was the Kings, is like they declined the option, and then the dude had an awesome season, and it's like, now he left in free agency, and we could have just had the fucking 5th-year option on him, and we're just like,
Yeah.
no, we don't want that. We don't even want the option to have the option. We don't. We're done. So, man, I knew that one was going to take a little bit, but this one might too. Wake up call number 2. People forgot what the theme of this podcast is. It's wake up calls. Carolina. You're everybody's celebrating because Carolina won. Like, all the Carolina fans are like, hell yeah, we won a football game. Wake up call. Things just got worse. Somehow, some way, things got worse. Yeah. The Mad Cats bench Bryce Young, the guy they picked number 1 overall a year ago and traded a ton of stuff for.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Dalton comes in. Balls. Like, maybe the best quarterback performance we've seen this season outside of Josh Allen. 26 for 37, 319, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Andy Dalton has now started 2 games in 2 years for Carolina. He has the same amount of multi-touchdown games that Bryce Young has at 2. This game somehow lowered Bryce Young's value even more because all Andy Dalton coming in and absolutely balling out does is make Bryce Young look even shittier. And now if you're Carolina, you have a horrific dilemma of like, what do we do? Because Andy Dalton is your starter now like at least until he's bad, you have to start him. Bryce Young has zero value right now.
Reports that people are interested, but at this point they're calling it offering like future sevenths.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're not offering much. There's a whole new path for quarterbacks, I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
where back in the day, if you were a bust, you were just a bust and you were out of the league.
Yeah.
And now there's this new path that like we already talked about these guys, but like Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Sam
Yeah.
Darnold, you go somewhere that has a good coaching staff and you sit on the bench for a year and you get coached up and you learn some stuff and then you sign with a good team or you go to a good team and kind of reinvent your career. So like Darnold sat on the 49ers bench for a year, then goes into Kevin McConnell's system and has played very well.
Yeah.
He balled out against the Texans the other day. He looked great. So Geno Smith goes to Seattle. He's benched behind Russell Wilson for a while and then takes over the reins of the starting job. Baker Mayfield goes and learns from Sean McVay for a while and then goes to Tampa with Dave Canales and like the whole thing. So I was reading this article that was saying Bryce Young should follow in those guys' footsteps and like go somewhere with a good coaching staff and learn for like a year and then go start somewhere else. And I was like, yeah, that's great. If I was Bryce Young, I would love to get out of Carolina right now.
Yeah.
I would love to go be the 49ers backup for the rest of this season and then like try to start for whoever next year. But one, like, who's offering anything significant for him? Because Carolina is not going to be willing to part with him. There's like the shittiest thing they can do is trade him for like a bad
Yeah.
pick. And then he goes somewhere and is like becomes good.
Oh, I mean, the thing is that they're forced to try to rehabilitate him.
Is it the right situation for him to like? I don't know. So it's going to be so difficult because if Andy Dalton keeps playing well, like the better Dalton plays for longer,
Yeah.
the worse Bryce Young looks. And then we're in the situation like it's basically the Deshaun Watson situation from this year where it's like, hey, we have a guy who's good in our system, but we need to move him somewhere else. Like they're like, get rid of Joe Flacco because we have to start Deshaun Watson again because we've invested so much in him. And it's going to be the same thing with Bryce Young, where it's like, hey, Andy Dalton, you were awesome this season, but you need to go somewhere else now because people are going to want you to play if you stay here.
Yeah. Well, and I think the reality is that we are very likely going to see Andy Dalton come back down to earth. Granted, I still expect him to look like an actual NFL quarterback because he knows what he's doing. He's been in the league forever. Like he understands the process and like can process the information that he sees on the field probably far more quickly than Bryce can because he's got over a decade worth of experience. That being said, like you also have Antonio Pierce calling out his team for business decisions all game long. So like, yeah, it was an ass beating. How much of that was on Las Vegas as well? So like, I don't know that like this was necessarily like Carolina all being dominant. More so the Raiders just laying an egg. Right.
Yeah, but
so
the optics are just not good.
No, the optics are terrible. And I think anyone who thought that Carolina was going to come out after that game and move him was absolutely insane. Like it's if he gets moved this season, it will be at the deadline. And in that case, it's very likely that Dalton has come crashing back down to earth.
Yeah.
To make Bryce look better.
You can't move. This is the thing. This is the kind of thing we were just talking about with bust and like how long you keep a quarterback. It's like you can't move him right.
Yeah.
You can't because you're not going to get anything that's
No.
worth the risk of giving him up and him being good somewhere else. But
Yeah, exactly. So,
it's
I
like
mean,
how long until you
yeah,
that's the thing is like these guys got to decide like how long until we do something with him because
yeah,
he can't just sit on your bench either.
right.
So
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is like when we were talking about it before the game actually happened, when we heard that he was being benched, like the only thing that made any sense to me is that like they are literally trying to protect him. And that's not even to say like that he didn't have support because their pass protection this year has actually been like one of the best in the league. But he clearly was so affected by the situation on the field last year that like he doesn't have the confidence and like the mental process to be able to go out there and do it right now. So I do think he needed to be benched. The question is how like are you able to work with him in a way where you're able to get him back that out there on the field this year? Because if he sits for the rest of the year, then I almost feel like that situation is untenable anyways.
yeah. It kind of reminds me of in baseball when you have to send somebody down to the minors, like a pitcher who's like a great pitcher, but is really struggling. And it's like, okay, we need to, like, you need to go get some practice reps and then come back. And sometimes those guys come back and they're awesome. And sometimes the fact that you sent them down to the minors completely destroys your relationship with them. And they're like, I'm out of here kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
And
on Bryce too, of like, how does he react to this? Because it hasn't been good
yeah,
so far. Pissed off.
yeah, we don't know how the information was delivered to. So like it there's so many unknowns with this, but the reality is yeah, like they kind of have to get him back on the field at some point this year.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's going to be hard to turn around and play him again next year.
Wake up call for the rest of the NFC South. You may not be the best division in football. Yeah. The NFC South riding pretty high after week 2. You had the 2-0 Saints, who we talked about last week, having the like best DVOA start ever to a season and dominating. The Bucks had just beat the Detroit Lions in a wonky game in Detroit to get to 2-0. The Falcons have that last minute comeback against the Eagles. Those 3 teams are like, oh yeah, like the Falcons are like, we got it back together. Those other 2 teams are like, we're awesome. Well, this week the Saints lost in horrific fashion to the Eagles, where the Eagles had the ball, need to go score on the last drive to win the game, 3rd and 16. They throw to Dallas Goedert. 3 Saints run into each other in the secondary, and Goedert goes for 60 yards and Philly scores. Tampa got annihilated at home by Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, 26-7. And then the Falcons lose on Sunday Night Football to another controversial Chiefs call, but are basically one Philly decision, like one really bad Philly decision away from being 0-3 at this
Yeah.
point. So the Falcons play the Saints this week. Tampa plays the Eagles. We could very easily just be back to all 3 of those teams being 2-2 and being 500 and just being like, yeah, this is par for the course with this damn division where one team will be 9-8, the other 2 will be 8-9, and that'll be
Yeah.
how this ends.
So it's interesting because if you look at that Saints Eagles game too, like the Eagles came into that game not being able to stop the run at all. Most a lot of those like big runs that they were giving up, Jordan Davis wasn't on the field because they were basically taking him off the field when they went to nickel. And so teams are like running the ball on them when they spread them out. And then Clint Kubiak apparently just feeling himself after the first 2 weeks. Pretty much exclusively goes with heavy personnel the entire game. And Jordan Davis is, what do you know, on the field for most of the game.
Yeah,
And suddenly they can defend the run. And it's like at at what point do you kind of look at what has been a problem for the other team and attack them that way rather than just doing what you want to do? Uh, I do think that will probably be something that is resolved. That is a young offensive coordinator that hopefully learned a lesson. Uh, the Falcons are just still the Falcons. They're gonna snatch defeat from the jaws of victory 9 times out of 10.
it's funny because you know that if a blatantly bad call favors somebody, it's going to be for the Chiefs. And the Falcons are one of the teams where it's like if there's a blatantly bad call, it's going to go against them. You know
Yeah.
that. And it happens on the DPI call with Kyle Pitts. And it's just like, yeah, that makes so much sense for how this
Yeah,
game's going to end.
and I am not gonna defend that at all. And still, it's like you had multiple opportunities to take control of that game or at least like take the lead. And you just didn't get the job done. Like, yeah, that play, like that should have been a call for sure. What about all the other opportunities? Because Lions fans have heard it for decades that like you can't just blame the refs. You know, you gotta execute on the other plays when they don't go your way. And yeah, it sucks needing to overcome yourself and the refs, but like you have control over one of those two things. So
That's the old Bill Belichick thing of if you put yourself in a position for the refs to screw you, then it's your fault in the first place. I should have done a wake up call for Clint Kubiak too, because he just went from being like the hottest coaching coordinator in
yeah,
the entire world to like, oh yeah, like okay,
I
we'll see how it
I
goes.
think he'll bounce back, but we'll see.
Wake up call for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you talk shit, you get hit. The Bengals are now 0-3 to start the season after their loss on Monday Night Football to Washington. We mentioned that they got cooked by a rookie quarterback earlier. This team has talked more shit. Like the shit talk per accomplishment ratio is probably the worst that we've ever seen. Like they've talked the most undeserved amount
Well,
of shit of any
they
team
have
I've ever
zero
seen.
wins, so you can't even calculate it.
I just mean in general. Like
I know, but it's like you need to you need to fucking win a game before you start
well,
talking shit.
this is the thing is they talk shit every single week and they haven't won a game yet.
Yeah.
So last week it was against the Chiefs where they're like, this team ain't shit. Like we got them, blah, blah, blah. This week, Cam Taylor Britt comes out and says Washington is running a college offense where they don't ask Daniels to do anything. And he's like, we're not worried about them. Well, 38 points later, Cam Taylor Britt probably
Yeah.
should have been worried about that. So they just have the most undeserved swagger of
Yeah.
any sports team that I can remember in a long time.
Yeah.
And now you got the Andy Dalton revenge game. Panthers Bengals this weekend in Carolina. If they go 0-4, holy hell. Man,
Yeah.
0-4
I
with the
mean,
they have
they're
healthy Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's
yeah,
healthy. So
well, healthy.
healthy. I mean, he looked good last night.
Yeah.
Looked good last night. Wake up call for the Chargers. Before we stop saying Chargers gonna charge, you gotta stop charging. They were 2-0. Everybody celebrating Jim Harbaugh. The Chargers are so great. Look at Jim Harbaugh. He's so smart. Such a good team. Such a good coach. Absolutely smacked in Pittsburgh this past weekend, 20-10. Now, like I said last week, they were my ultimate wait and see team.
Yeah.
They were 2-0. They beat the Raiders and the Panthers with Bryce Young. It's like, yeah, like it's been fun so far, but their next two games are Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Now Justin Herbert is probably out for this weekend. Looking at the fact that the line is Kansas City by 8.5, I'm assuming that Justin is gone now. That's my new name for him.
Yeah.
Herbert, because he can't stay on the field. But also maybe it'd be nice to have some wide receivers. You know, it's watching Justin get absolutely like he's running for his life and trying to make big throws while TJ Watt and Highsmith and those guys are nailing him every play. And there's just
You know
nobody
that
to throw
wide
to.
receivers don't have a role in a Greg Roman offense.
Yeah. And then last one before we go to Bolds and Scolds. Wake up call for the Ravens. You have a closing problem. I don't even know what to call it. I was going to call it clock management issue, but it's not that. It's they have an inability to close games right now. So they won 28-25 against the Cowboys this weekend, but that was after being up 28-6 and allowing 19 points in the fourth quarter. I said this last week after they blew a 10-point lead to the Raiders in the fourth quarter, which based on what happened this week, we may look back at the fact the Raiders beat the Ravens this season and be like, wow, that was the weirdest game of the entire year. I don't know. Like, if any team should be able to protect a 10-point lead and put the other team away, it should be the Ravens. And we can't even blame it on like the play calling as much this week because they only threw like 15 times.
Yeah.
It's like maybe they should have thrown more was the correct answer, but something's really wrong there. And their defense actually has been pretty horrific to start the season. They're dead last against the pass through 3 weeks, which is extremely un-Ravens like.
The Ravens have a problem. I am kind of identifying a different problem. They have a serious penalty problem. Like a serious one. They should be 3-0. Like just based off of penalties. So last week they had 13 accepted penalties. The week before, against Vegas, they had 11 accepted penalties. And in week 1, against the Kansas City Chiefs, they had 7 accepted penalties. 31 penalties in 3 weeks?
Let me put it this
accepted.
way. They're 32nd in penalty yards right now, 92.7 per game.
Mm-hmm.
Number 31 is Miami at 79.
Yeah.
So they're a full 13 yards per game worse.
Yeah, they've exceeded 79 in 2 of those games already.
Yeah.
So
that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you play a clean game against Kansas City, you probably win, despite the toe, right? If you play a clean game against the Raiders, you absolutely win that game. Like, for sure. And if you play a clean game against Dallas, I don't think they get back in the game. And like back in the game is honestly kind of misleading because they were down like 20 at the end of the third, right? So like
28-6. They're down 22.
Yeah, but it's like they got back to within like 3 with 3 minutes left. But like they also there's only so many like rabbits they can pull out of a hat. Because quite frankly, despite the numbers, Dallas's passing attack is not good. I mean, they do need to tighten it up, but like I think it's more like they need to play a clean game because they keep putting themselves in really bad positions.
That's fair, but they're also dead last against the pass right now.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
you got Buffalo on Sunday Night Football this week.
Mhm.
So wake up call
Right.
for the Ravens.
And
Clean it
oh,
up.
I mean, what I will say is if you can't get off the field because you keep committing penalties, they're going to keep racking up passing yards.
Yep.
So,
That'll do it. So that's a good point. So there's a couple things that need to be done for the Ravens. But all right, America's favorite segment, Bolds and Scolds for week 3 of the NFL season. Matt, it is your week to go first with your bold.
I'm going with Matt Stafford. That was fucking vintage Matt Stafford
Yeah.
this past week.
We talked about who was going to do my bold, which is from the same game. But
Yeah.
if you were going to do mine, I was going to do yours, basically Stafford and McVay.
In my opinion, this man, if I had a vote, is no doubt a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, he's got all the numbers and all that, but just when you see what that dude does in a close and late game, like other other than Mahomes, like who do you want over this guy in that situation?
Maybe
May
nobody who's in the league right now.
Yeah, right. And like this guy is just so good. And I know, yeah, there's times where he can be a little bit turnover prone, but like he bided his time in that game, right? He played a clean game, and like when they had the opportunity to strike, they took it. And like, yeah, his stat line wasn't like super impressive in that game, but he was the reason why they were able to pull that off. Like, he is also, I think, the best argument for why every quarterback needs a running game. So,
I thought it was funny. The fantasy advice I kept seeing was like, you should get rid of Kyron Williams because without Cup and Nakua
yeah.
out there,
Mhm.
that he's going to like not be able to produce because everybody's going to be focused on him, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
130 yards and 3 touchdowns later.
Yeah,
He was
well,
he was good too. So
and I mean, it stops them from going to 0-3, which is huge. And they took the first game in the series with uh San Francisco, which if Seattle plays as well the rest of this year as they are now, like that's probably going to be huge because like they neither of those two teams might catch them, and then you're talking about like which team makes the playoffs maybe, if not that, then like wild card seeding at the very least. So
yeah, well, Seattle's one of the biggest winners of the first couple weeks of the season because we've played 3 weeks and they have a 2 game lead in their division,
yeah.
right? So my bold is from the same game, but I'm going on the 49ers side. Mine is 49ers wide receiver Juan Jennings. He's wide receiver 3 on the 49ers, probably like the 5th option in that offense typically with all the mouths they got to feed. Has to step into a bigger role because Debo, Kittle, and CMC are all out for that game. Puts up 11 catches for 175 and 3 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
In point 0.5 PPR, it was the second biggest performance of the season. For his 41 fantasy points are only second to Alvin Kamara's 43 from week 2. He had 1,069 yards and 7 touchdowns coming into this game for his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely balls. And just on a personal note, I've been having wide receiver 2 issues on my fantasy team so far. So I picked him up and put him in my starting lineup at
Yeah.
about like did that at noon. He put up
Yeah, so we
41.
both
It's like, woo!
we both picked him up in different leagues this year, this week, this past week. Uh for you it mattered. For me, nobody else
It didn't
participated in fantasy football.
it actually it didn't matter to me because I beat Sean so badly this week that even if Juan Jennings didn't play, I still would have won. Yeah, I beat Sean 132 to 77. So even if I didn't get 41 points from Juwan Jennings, I still would have won by a lot.
Jesus Christ.
So it didn't matter that much. But, it was just fun because you make a move like that, hoping, okay, he's going to get a bigger role. Maybe he gets like 5 catches for 70, and he's my wide receiver too. So I'm like, I just need like a high floor play here. And then it's like, phone goes off. Juwan Jennings, touchdown. You're like, yes.
Juwan Jennings greater than Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
Confirmed.
You're like, I nailed that pick. And then it's like, Juwan Jennings, another touchdown. You're like, holy shit, this is the greatest pickup ever. And then it's Juwan Jennings for the hat trick. And I was just running around my house on Sunday going, whoa. Can't believe I wasn't going to play fantasy football.
I'm gonna laugh my ass off when he hat tricks the receiving stats for them this year after they spent all that money.
I would just love it because he's on my fantasy team now. But I was gonna say, I can't believe I wasn't going to play fantasy this season. My team's 3-0. I've dominated every single week so far. Like, I'm having a blast, and I know that 3 weeks from now, when I'm 3-3, I'm gonna be on here and be yelling at you and be like, Matt, why did you make me play this stupid game? I'm having fun right now. Having fun. It's fun.
I love how you're gonna say that when like you went and did it of your own accord.
I know. I like to say that you made me do it, but I was just waiting for one of
previous years you could have said that, but not this year.
I was like, I quit all my leagues and I was just sitting there waiting because I was like, I know somebody's gonna text me and need somebody to be in their league, but I'm having fun so far, except for the Mark Andrews thing. All right, who's your scold for week 3?
So I'm gonna channel some office space here, and I really just want to ask Zac Taylor, what is it that you would say you do here? Because I don't think it's coaching football. Like, seriously, what do you bring to the table? Because like you don't have unhealthy Joe Burrow to fall back on this year. Obviously, like remains to be seen long term what his wrist looks like, but he looked good this weekend. So like you're clearly not getting your team prepared to win games. And that makes me think that you don't know how to do that. It's just another one of those situations like Doug Peterson winning the Super Bowl. Well, he got to the Super Bowl because Joe Burrow was fucking incredible. And he's just going to ride on that for far too long.
Yeah, I think last night might have been the official, we can all stop thinking of the Bengals as a potential threat game.
Yeah.
I don't even mean just for this season, because like, yeah, 0-3 is a really big hole and like not a good one to pull yourself out of. Can they do it? Like, they have Joe Burrow, so we'll see. But I just think there's this perception, and we talked about this in the preseason too, is like people keep talking about the Bengals being threats to the Chiefs because they beat them once and then played them tight one other time.
Yeah.
And they're like the only other AFC team that's gone to a Super Bowl in years. But I think the further away we get from that, the more we're going to be like, yeah, Mahomes was probably concussed and shouldn't have played the second half of that game. And this team's really not what they think they are. My scold, my favorite one of the season so far. It's Falcons owner Arthur Blank. Do you know why I'm scolding Arthur Blank? I feel like this went under the radar for a lot of people.
I was waiting for us to record to find out. So you're getting a live reaction here.
Yeah, because I missed this. And then I was listening to a podcast where they talked about it. And I was like, there's no way that that's right. So I went back and looked at it. And sure enough. So it's hard to say this with a straight face. Arthur Blank was inducted into the Atlanta Falcons Ring of Honor during halftime of the Sunday Night Football game. Oh,
What?
yes. A wonderful achievement for many former football players, coaches, people who had impacts on franchises is that a lot of franchises have what they call a Ring of Honor. It's like their Hall of Fame. The Patriots have like a Patriots Hall of Fame. Other people have Ring of Honors. But great accomplishment for Arthur Blank to be inducted into his team's Ring of Honor. Except for the fact that the person who decides who gets inducted into the Ring of Honor is Arthur Blank. He inducted himself into his own team's Ring of Honor during halftime of the Sunday Night Football game. They had an entire ceremony for him to get inducted where he went to midfield. He was the only one being inducted on Sunday night. He got to go in by himself to join the likes of like Matt Ryan is getting inducted into the Falcons Ring of Honor in week 5. Deion Sanders is in it. Tony Gonzalez, like real people who really did real things.
Yeah.
And Arthur Blank just, he was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm putting myself in.
This feels like a Michael Scott thing.
This is the ultimate like self-indulgent masturbatory moment for an owner to do this. And I think that it's going to set off other owners to do like, I think Jerry Jones is going to be pissed that he didn't do this first. He's like, I need to induct myself. But I was just thinking about it though. And I was like, yeah, like I know, like, so he made the decision to put himself in. But I was like, even if there was a committee to decide who should go into the Falcons Ring of Honor, why would they pick Arthur Blank?
Yeah.
That he bought the team in 2002. Since then, they're 179 and 169, which is a 51% win percentage. They've made one Super Bowl where they were up 28-3 and lost. And honestly, the things that he's most famous for, I don't even think most people could tell you where Arthur Blank made his money. He co-founded Home Depot.
Yeah.
But he's more famous for being down on the sideline while his team was up 28-3 and watching them collapse. He's more famous for being in the Falcons draft room as they drafted Michael Penix after they had just given Kirk Cousins a massive deal.
Yeah.
He's not even a good owner. Like, he's not going to be in the NFL Hall of Fame. If there was an owner Hall of Fame, he wouldn't be in it. But you know what? He gets to be in the Atlanta Falcons Ring of Honor because he put himself there. And then the Falcons went out and lost the game. And I thought it was very symbolic of his time as owner. Celebrate before things are over, and then they end badly. So, last couple things here before we sign off. Gambling picks for Thursday Night Football on the weekend. We were 2-2 on the podcast picks last week. Matt carried us because you hit, was it the under in Thursday Night Football? The game went under 36.5. And then you had Green Bay to beat Tennessee last week. I had the Patriots to keep it within 6.5, which was a horrifically bad pick.
Yeah.
And the Chargers to beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, also a bad pick. So let's all thank Matt for keeping us afloat last week.
Yeah, it would be nice if those were the picks that I made bets on.
Tough one. I had a bad gambling week last week. I had an excellent fantasy week, bad gambling week. So time to get back to basics, time to bounce back for week 4. Thursday Night Football is Cowboys at Giants. I don't really know what to do with this game because it's Cowboys by 5.5 at New York. But I did a deep dive today because I was like, we were 4-0 or 4-1, including the long shot bet the week before.
Yeah.
And then I dragged us down last week. So I was like, I got to find some like surefire banger bets. So I did a deep dive on everything that was available on DraftKings for this game. You want to know what I came up with, Matt?
What's that?
Dallas kicker Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals is minus 140 right now. So he's got to hit 2 or more. If you guys haven't paid attention to Brandon Aubrey, last year and this year. And I know people don't because he's a kicker. He's the best kicker in the league now. He's by far like usurped that title from Justin Tucker. He's 10 for 10 so far this season and 5 of 5 on kicks over 50 yards. He hit a 65-yarder versus Baltimore on Sunday. And like it probably would have been good from 75. He is an absolute, like, he's just dropping bombs all over the place. I think he had 2 field goals last week, but the first 2 weeks he had 4 each game. So like over 1.5, I feel like that's just easy money. And I know the odds aren't amazing, but I'm just going to take the win. Take the win here with Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals. I don't think there's no way he misses that. He can kick it from 70 yards away and still make it. Like if Dallas just, if they fair catch the kickoff and just kick it from there, he will make that. No problem.
Yeah.
What's your pick for Thursday night?
So we're trying to actually hit these, so I'm going to resist the urge to
I know you want to pick Giants.
Dallas looks so bad.
I know you want to pick Giants money line.
So fucking bad.
Matt wants to pick Giants money line so badly.
I mean, I might actually like place the bets, but as for today, I see Devin Singletary is set at 60.5 rushing yards. Dallas has not shown any sort of capacity to stop the run at all this season. At all. Against various teams that have different styles of running. It's not like they just couldn't stop it against the Ravens and like they'll be able to handle it against a wide zone team, right? Like they haven't handled it against anyone yet. On the season, they're allowing 5.4 yards per carry through 3 games. And they're giving up 185.7 yards per game on the ground. Like they are getting blown off the ball.
What'd you say Singletary was? 60.5?
60.5. I'm taking the over on that.
Okay. So we have Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals. Devin Singletary over 60.5 rushing yards. My weekend bet right now, it's hard. So we switch every week. We either record on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. When we record on Tuesdays, like we are this week, the player props are not posted for the weekend yet. But when we do it on Wednesdays, the player props are posted. So it makes it a little harder to do it on Tuesdays. But yeah. I have one I like. I am going with the Steelers -2 at the Colts. And I've already placed this bet. I don't know that everybody, like the public, gambling public, has fully grasped the fact that Pittsburgh has the best defense in the league this year. I don't know if we're all ready to say that yet, but I'm ready to say that because I watched that Chargers game the other day and woof, like that defense is awesome. I could see this game being a nightmare for Richardson with the athleticism on this defense. And I don't let the Bears game fool you. The Colts are bad against the run. And that's what the Steelers want to do. They just want to pound the rock and they want to play good defense. And I think this is like the perfect spot for them indoors against the Colts. -2, give it to me.
Honestly, I'm struggling to understand how they're setting the over under at 40.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'm nervous about this weekend because there's a lot of lines that don't make sense to me.
Yep.
Like the Bears are 2.5 point favorites over the Rams. The Falcons are favored over the Saints by 1.5. I don't understand a lot of these lines. So there's going to be a lot I stay away from, but Steelers Colts, I like the Steelers in that one. I think the Steelers are good.
Yeah. I mean, they got the Rams money line at plus 120. I I I know they're on the road. I've got to take that. This this is a Bears team that just can't figure it out. And I mean, we just saw a short-handed Rams team be able to like muster what they need to in order to be a problem for a much better team than the Bears are. And this is also a Rams team led by Matt Stafford that is sitting at 1-2, that certainly is not comfortable with going down to 1-3. And I just feel like if this game even remains close, that the Bears don't have a chance to win that.
My only piece of advice on this one, and the reason I'm staying away from it, is because I claim to have learned my lesson a couple weeks ago,
I know.
where if a line doesn't make any sense to you, it's probably a stay away.
I
But
and I get it to a certain degree because when a team is home, they automatically, shift a certain direction. And obviously the Rams have a ton of injuries. I just think that there's enough tape out there on the Bears defense right now for Stafford and McVay to have a plan to not get Stafford killed. And if it's close at all in the fourth quarter, I am betting against the Bears.
that's fair. All right, long shot pick of the week. I decided no more parlays because, of course, we did a 3-leg parlay for the long shot bet of the week last week. And 2 of the legs hit and the third didn't because it's always one leg too long. So we're going.
What was the third leg?
It was Chargers to beat the Steelers.
That's right.
So the Packers beat Tennessee, the Malik
Yep.
Willis revenge game. Awesome. The Seahawks took care of business against Miami, and then the Chargers lost. So
Yeah.
we were close, but again, one leg too long. So I'm going back to single picks that are plus 300 or more. Matt, the Ravens are favored by 2.5 over the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football. I'm reversing that line and pulling it all the way until we hit plus 300 odds. I have the Buffalo Bills -7 at the Ravens. The Ravens,
Yeah.
bad against pass. So not great to go up against Josh Allen when you bat against pass. And then we just talked about all their penalties, all the stuff they need to clean up.
Yeah.
I don't know if they clean that up enough to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably close, but as far as like a long shot bet that's plus 300 or more, I could see this. I could see the Bills winning this by 10. So Bills -7 at the Ravens is plus 318. That's your long shot bet. And that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Gmail, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. You can find our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Banger of a college football game this weekend as Georgia visits Alabama. Number 2 versus number 4. I'm a little whelmed on college football this season. The regular season feels like it matters less because of the 12-team playoff right now. And as excited as I am for the playoff, I look at this Georgia-Alabama game and I'm just kind of like, yeah, but they're probably both going to make the playoff still. So there's still some stakes here, but they're just not as high as oh man, whoever loses this might not make it at all. So I'm still excited for the game, but just not as hyped as I normally would be. And then another 2 Monday Night Football games next week, which thank God they have 2 because one of them is Titans and Dolphins, which That's horrible. But the other one is Seahawks Lions, and I'm really looking forward to that. So
Can I just say that the line on the Titans and Dolphins game is the funniest thing.
the fact that it's -1, or that it's 36.5 points.
So like the money lines are Dolphins -112 and Titans -108.
Yeah, they don't know
But the Titans are rolling with their starting quarterback.
They don't know what to do because it's Will Levis versus probably Tim Boyle. We had a Tim Boyle sighting in Seattle.
Yeah.
And woof, man. This is the thing with like the Tua injury. If you own like Waddle or Hill or any of those guys in fantasy, even though your guy didn't get hurt, you're still just kind of screwed.
Yeah.
You got to rely on Tim Boyle. So maybe Ryan Tannehill will sign with Miami this week. We'll find out. That would be exciting. That would get me excited. Ryan Tannehill versus Tennessee, coming back to Miami where he used to play. Come on. But all right, everybody, enjoy the football this weekend. We'll be back next week, Thursday, before that Thursday night football game with a recap of week 4 and looking forward to week 5. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys then because we get to watch more football. So
for sure.
All right, my friend. I'll see you soon.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, Mom.
Bye, Robin.